Welcome to the Life Unscripted. I'm your host, Rosabel Zohfeld. I'm so glad you're here. In each episode, I'll be bringing you raw, real stories and deep conversations that cover everything from personal growth and wellness to real-life challenges. I'll be chatting with incredible guests who are making an impact in their communities and sharing insights that can help us all navigate life a little better. Whether you're looking for inspiration or just a dose of real talk, you're in the right place. So grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive into another episode of The Life Unscripted. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Life Unscripted Podcast with Rosabel. Today, I am thrilled to welcome you, Mark Steven Porro. He's an award-winning designer, writer, director, and now a best-selling author, right? Of the memoir, A Cup of Tea on the Commode. Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, it's nice to be back in the States. So, thank you for having me. And let's go unscripted.
All right. That's awesome. Great. So, Mark, tell us, you were just telling me a few minutes ago that you are actually in France. That's where you live currently?
I am
Tell me about it.
the south of France in a little village called Pézenas. And they say Moliere was born here. So he's one of the local celebrities. I am slowly becoming the American one. I got away from Hollywood because I was in Hollywood for 28 years. And it's a very artsy town. It's about 8,500 people. And it is very cool. They have their own Hollywood Walk of Fame kind of thing with all famous French artists and theater people. And it is just a really cool village. I came here originally about 10 years ago, and I spent 5 days here and fell in love with the village and said, I'm going to live here. And
Wow.
I bought this place that you see in the backdrop, and it's, they tell me it was built around 1540. So it's got a lot of history. And I've had a couple spiritual guys come in to check it out to make sure there was no evil, happenings here. And both of them said, no, all positive, which is cool.
That's awesome. So
And
you
I
can
live on a
sleep.
cobblestone street in the historic center of this village, and it's absolutely lovely.
Wow. And you mentioned that you wrote your book there?
Yeah, well, I needed some emotional distance, and I not only put emotional distance, but I put distance
Yes.
to write this book because it was it's a touchy subject, and I get pretty emotional whenever I talk about family and stuff. So
Absolutely. Can you
though
tell
there's
us
a
more
lot of
about the
humor,
book?
and there's a lot of humor in my experience, but I needed some time.
Tell us about the book. What's in it?
But it's called A Cup of Tea on the Commode, My Multitasking Adventures of Caring for Mom and How I Survived to Tell the Tale. And so I was living in Los Angeles, and I was in my mid-50s enjoying my carefree bachelor life. I had no kids. I was never married. And I had a snack food business that was keeping me pretty busy. And but my acting career was kind of slowing up because I was aging out of it, and I wasn't a big star at that point. But I had a pretty good run. But then I got a call from my brother. My mom was living in the house we all grew up in New Jersey, and we had she just turned 89, and I think she looked around at her life and said, I'm out of here. Because she just shut down. There was no medical reason. She did suffer from some depression throughout her life, but she hid it very well. That generation didn't talk about pain or feelings or anything like that. They kind of kept it close to the vest. So that was it. My brother called and said, I put her to bed and she's non-responsive. I called the doctor. The doctor cut off all meds and food and said, call hospice. She's going. And so she had 6 kids. We all flew in and we were on death watch. And so that was kind of shocking. I'm the 5th kid. I got 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters. And my younger sister and I hung out with hospice. And we didn't know how long Mom was going to be with us. So we wanted to care for her as much as possible. So hospice was very generous, and they taught us a bunch of stuff. So we learned how to change the bedding with a helpless patient in bed, and change the diapers, and sponge bathe, and care for any kind of medical needs. Mom barely opened her eyes. She didn't look at any of us. She looked at the corner of the room, which I have a chapter about that. That was the only thing she responded. She responded a little bit to touch, but she never spoke. And that was it. And she was breathing very lightly. So it was a few weeks later that she snapped out of it. And she snapped out of it because one of the hospice nurses broke the rules. And instead of obeying no food, no meds, let her transition, she went in and she said, "Mrs. Porro, are you hungry?" And my mother's eyes flashed open like a dinner bell went off. And she didn't want any food or anything for like 3 weeks, and all of a sudden she's excited. And now this nurse accuses us of trying to starve our mother to death, which I found out through some research and by doing lots of interviews for the books that these kind of things do happen. We were very fortunate. We weren't doing that. We loved our mom and wanted her to hang out for some more time. And so she went in and called her supervisor and again accused us of starving our mother to death. And they said, no, this was the directive. You broke the rules. You have to go, leave, and we're going to send another nurse in. But in the meantime, I'm sitting here feeling guilty, thinking that maybe the original assessment was incorrect and mom wasn't ready to go. So I went in and I said, "Mom, are you hungry?" And she spoke for the first time in weeks. She says, "Well, what do you got?" And I said, "Well, anything you want." And she said, "Well, how about some pumpkin pie?" Well, it's March. This whole thing started in February. Now it's March, and that's not exactly pumpkin pie season. But my brother, who lived close by, was in the living room. So I said, "If you can go buy some pumpkin pies, please do." And he came back in less than a half hour with 2 pumpkin pies. I don't know if he baked them or where he got them, but he had 2 fresh pumpkin pies. And we gave mom a spoonful, and the first spoonful she spit out because it was the first food in weeks. I said, "Well, that didn't go very well." But the second spoon did, and she downed half the pie. And the color came back into her cheeks, and she was alert, and she was back. And it might have been, a sugar high or whatever it was, but that pumpkin pie was a little bit of a miracle. And the next day she finished the second half. And the next day, I think she finished the entire pie. And then she moved on. So we realized she was probably, riding the most continuous sugar high, but she was awake and we didn't want to change anything. And so whatever this woman wanted, she got. So she moved on to sherbet after that. And she had like 8 bowls of sherbet a day. New Jersey was running out of sherbet. But again, that's all she wanted. And again, it was a high sugar content. She was a type 2 diabetic, but this is what she wanted. And she was doing great. Eventually, we snuck some real food in there, but she was back. And I have a chapter in the book. It's called The Silent Scream. And I think it was a cry for help. She didn't have much love in her life at that point, and she was lonely. We had some people that were overseeing household duties and were supposed to keep her company that were living upstairs, and she did not get along with them. So we noticed a lot of the tension when I visited and stuff like that, and the other kids did too. But my brother, who hired these people, and it was like the point man for the family, was like, "Well, if you don't like them, you got to come here and hire some people and take some responsibility for that." Nobody was willing to do it at that point. But now, looking around where our mother was literally on her deathbed, we had a priest come in and deliver the last rites and all that stuff. And now that she's back, I'm thinking, okay, we have to, she deserves better. We got to give her better. And so then the idea of me jumping in and taking more responsibility certainly became part of the equation. So I stayed there for a number of weeks. And when I felt she was on the mend, I had to go back to LA to tend to my business. But we kept in touch. And at that point, she had an iPad, so we'd do FaceTiming and things like that. And she was still doing good, but the people that were in the house that I think had something to do with her depression were still involved. And so later in the year, by the end of that year, I moved in full time. And again, first as a supervisor, but eventually I took over the 24/7 care when we weren't successful in finding anybody that I thought was going to be, I guess, good enough. I'm kind of picky, and especially with mom. So I decided to take over the 24/7 care. And yeah. So that's what the adventures are in the book. So
Is
it
your
was about a
mother still
3.5
alive?
year.
Is your mother still alive?
No, she died over 10 years ago. So she lived another 3.5 years.
After
Uh,
that?
yeah. And so the book captures that.
Oh, okay.
And then a lot of backstory and a lot of fun. She was a very funny lady. My dad was pretty funny too. And luckily they passed that on to their kids. So humor played a big role in this.
Wow.
And I told her if I asked for permission, actually, when I came back. So this whole thing started February. And I went back probably in May. And then I came back in September because a nephew was getting married at the Jersey Shore. So that was going to be mom's first outing since this near death experience. So I grew up with three sisters with long hair, and I learned how to do more than just put the toilet seat down. And so I got mom all dolled up. I kind of took it a romantic approach. And I knew that she liked getting her hair done. When she visited me in California, I would take her to my friend's salon in Beverly Hills, and she got the movie star treatment. I knew she loved all that stuff. So I tried to pamper her as much as possible. And this wedding was great. She was like, she wanted to get up and dance. At this point, she's in a wheelchair, so no, she couldn't, but she tried. And she had a lovely time. And so that for those 2 weeks, again, I took care of her. I told the people who were involved, I said, take a break. I got this. So I did all the cooking and caring for her. And I saw just the change in her. And so I
Wow,
asked her if she wanted me to come and make sure she was treated like this for the rest of her life. And she said, yes.
it's
And,
beautiful. Those are the
uh,
memories that we carry on.
yeah, that was fun. But it did, I mean, she was a tough cookie, very
Yeah.
independent. So I said, first of all, if I do this, we're going to have fun. Second of all, do you trust me? And she said, yes. And I said, do you know that I will care for you, keep you safe and healthy for the rest of your life? She said, yes. I said, well, that means now I'm in charge. And now you must obey me. And her mood
Wow.
completely changed. And,
What an
but she
interesting
puckered up for a
story.
kiss. And I wasn't sure if that was a sign of surrender or one wishing me luck. And, so I gave her a kiss and hoped for the best, and it turned out to be pretty. It was a lovely experience for me, and I think she enjoyed it quite a bit too.
So, what are the odds? Because I very little, of course. I don't. I get to know my guests. I'm all honest a lot more, and that's the idea to having this honest conversations. I used to be a hospice nurse. I don't know, 15 years ago or so.
Oh,
So I
great.
can,
Okay, yeah,
yeah.
all right.
So I can definitely relate to all the things that you're mentioning, and that's a very interesting. There's so many stories in so many ways.
Yeah.
But wow, that is incredible. And then when did you publish the book?
The book it came out on Mother's Day 2023.
Okay. And then you got all these beautiful awards. Tell me about those.
Well, that's kinda nice. I mean, did a lot of I used to write jokes. I did some stand-up in LA and wrote a lot of screenplays, and so that was my writing experience. So whenever I approach anything, it's usually visually. How would this look like on the screen, the silver screen? And, so I didn't know what I was gonna do with it. I always recorded family history. Like with my dad, I only had 8 days with my dad, and I just took a ton of notes because I didn't want to forget any of these moments that we had. And with mom, since we had 3.5 years, I took a lot of photos, of videos, and I was privy to some really interesting conversations because she suffered from a little bit of dementia. So she had visions and saw people that I didn't see. And it was lovely. And I didn't want my siblings to miss out. So I just started recording all this stuff. And then while I was doing this, another friend was going through something similar with one of her folks. And so I shared some of the tips and tricks that I learned from hospice and how I was approaching it. And she got some benefit from it. So I said, I think I got something here. So maybe a book is the best way because I can control that. In Hollywood, you don't have much control. And so I started studying memoir. I've never written a book and certainly not a memoir. So I started studying memoir and reading memoir. And then I had a memoir coach and she was great, but I needed some emotional distance. And so I didn't write the book until I moved to France. But whenever I came up with, and that's the way I work, if I have an inspiration or a thought that I think would be good for the book, I would jot it down. So I had tons and tons of notes. So I wrote it here. And actually, my memoir coach was my first editor. So she ran through it and gave me some great notes. And then I did another draft. And then I said, I want to be published. I don't want to self-publish. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think I've got a good story here. And I ended up the usual story, get rejections all over the place. But one publisher, and I don't know why, but it's just, yeah, it's interesting. In the universe, if you make a decision to do something and it's I think good for the world, the universe seems to help support that. And for some reason, all these really neat things came together to make this thing happen. Why I'm in France, I have no idea, but we have French relatives on my mom's side. So they may have had something to do with this. But this one publisher said no really fast. And so I responded to them. I said, let me ask you a question, because at that point I was living in France, so everything had a French address. And I said, does living in France have anything to do with you rejecting me? And she said, yes. Foreign writers don't understand American marketing. And I said, I'm from Jersey. I know marketing. And she says, oh, send us the manuscript. And the acquisition editor happened to grow up in the same area in Long Island that my parents grew up in. So she responded very favorably to this screenplay, not
Wow.
screenplay, the manuscript. So they contacted me and said, we like your voice. We like the story. Think it has a lot of potential, but we have notes. Do you accept the notes? I said, give me the notes. I said, I'm a new writer. I want to hear them. And the notes were excellent. So I did another draft. I took a number of weeks, did another draft, and they accepted that one. And then I worked with them for probably about a year and a half. I worked with two other editors, and they were lovely. And I had another publisher who came after me, which was very interesting. So before I chose to go with that one that originally rejected me, we looked at the contracts and things like that. And I was more interested in quality. I wanted this book to be as good as it could be because I think it has a great message. So I wanted the audience to be wide and respected. We respect the writing and the publisher and stuff. The other publisher wanted to get it out fast. He goes, oh, we're going hardcover. We'll get it out fast. Bing, bing, bing. And I don't like that. I dealt with that in Hollywood. It was like more of a used car salesman and stuff like that. So I chose the other one that wanted quality. Again, you don't know. It's a very personal story, but there's a lot of funny stuff in there. It's very entertaining. But again, you put your heart and soul into something. You don't know if it's, people are going to respond to it or if it's going to
Right.
resonate with others. So that's kind of scary. I
Yeah.
didn't let my siblings read it until it was published, which I've heard was a better thing to do if you're writing a memoir, especially. But I wanted it to be a very honest book, and people have called it raw and doesn't shy away from any of the aspects of caregiving, but also a lot of humor. So people say they cry out loud and they laugh out loud. So that's lovely. And then the reviews are excellent, the early reviews, and the sales have been good and continue to be very nice. But yeah, the awards are that's a nice, I guess, feather in your cap. So it's 16 so far, which is lovely. But the personal notes I've received from people who've read the book are just incredible. I mean, those things are more important to me. Again, you don't know, but people have said that's helped them through a situation, or they understood, they wanted to see what a different perspective was, especially from a son, because still the caregiving duties fall on the women of the family. But we're catching up, but it's about a 60-40 split still. So that's nice. And now we're talking with some people in Hollywood and also talking about foreign rights. So China is going to be the first country that purchased the rights, and that could be very exciting because they have a few readers over there, and
That's
they
awesome.
care for their parents, so that's kind of fun. So we'll have to see
Yes.
how that goes, but that's in the works now. So I won't be able to proof that. I have no idea what they're saying or what they're doing with it, but it's kind of fun. And we have some other irons in the fire, so we'll see what happens.
Yes. My next question is going to be about what are going to be the next chapters, like what's on the horizon. But before we go there, let me just give you a little bit of background here. And me, I wrote my memoir. It's a memoir that's been in the making since 16 years of age. I said one day I want to be a writer. I want to write a book. So I got all these ideas, and like you, I started adding notes and notes, and things are happening along. So just this year, but it's self-published, of course. And then, so I hear where you're saying. I know that it takes a lot of work to get a publisher, and it's time, but it's beautiful, like you say. When you're looking at the quality and so on and whatnot. But talking about writing a memoir first, I mean, you name it, you get all kinds of even from people that haven't even read the memoir. For example, one of the things was like, well, aren't you too young to write a memoir? Well, says who? For one thing. And then secondly, I mean, it talks about my life growing back in Colombia, South America. It's exciting because I always think about, there's, as you go, I don't know if that ever happened to you in your book, that you're like, oh, I remembered that one story. I forgot to mention that. I forgot. Has it happened to you? Do you have some other like, oh man, I wish I would have
Well,
read about
sure.
that.
Yeah, yeah. The last draft that I turned into the publisher, I cut out over 4,000 words because
Uh,
I thought this should go in another book. This is not it's family related and stuff, but it would be better in my dad's book. And there's still a couple chapters in A Cup of Tea that could go in because I'm working on the book that's going to focus more on my dad, and so I may from a different point of view, look at those chapters and see what we can do because I think they would be better served in my dad's book.
right.
Um,
But I can
uh,
definitely, what you say about it's a sensitive matter, especially when you're writing about other people that are still alive and so on, family members and whatnot. So I try to be very respectful on that. But at the same time, because I did a little bit of research, okay, what if I say something or whatever? But then you think, well, it's my story from my point of view, It's so I try to make it more about me and not because I'm trying to be selfish, but sometimes you're like, well, you want to be honest too. You want to say it like you felt it, like it is. You don't want to
yeah,
shy away from certain things. So, but there's a very fine line in there.
yeah,
My book unfortunately doesn't have much. There's no humor in there. I wish because there are really some actual very very difficult things in there. But
yeah.
we'll see what happens. So, the future is we never know,
I
right?
would I would say continue with it and don't filter yourself.
Right.
Let it all out and don't worry about hurting other people. What you're writing now is not going to be how it finishes. So put it
Exactly.
all out there and then you start taking away certain things. There was a scene, and I think my brother's still not happy about it, that there was a number of things that I was privy to that my siblings weren't. I had a very interesting relationship with both folks. I was a curious kid. I got them to open up about things that never opened up. And I also lived away from home, probably the longest from anybody. At least that was curious. So when my parents would come out to visit me in California or when I went to school at Ohio State, I had them to myself and we would have very interesting conversations. And sometimes the folks would come together, sometimes separately. It was very cool. So there's some revelations in the book that I think were a surprise to my siblings.
Right.
Hopefully not in a bad way, but I know my one brother said, "Oh, I don't, if mom and dad wanted that out, they would have written it." I said, "Well, no. First of all, no, but and also I don't think it puts them in a bad light, but it's just this is a fact, and this shaped the six of us." So,
Yes.
um, yeah, so I learned from, let's say, Memoir Coach and other memoirs. Don't filter and don't let other people read it because, like you said, it's from your point of view.
Exactly.
Nobody else is going to have that point of view, even if somebody was experiencing the same incident or memory, their memory from their point of view is going to be very different from yours. So,
I'll
um,
be honest, I wrote the book and I didn't even, and I'm like, I told my dad, for example, he's still alive. I said, Dad, I wrote a book. It's about this. And that's it. I don't even want him to read it. I mean, he can. I sent him a few chapters, but then a few other ones, like maybe later on you'll find out. But the other thing I also feel like I relate with what you're saying is the fact that you see how you feel like you had to move away to be able to finally put it together. It's the same thing with me. I'm in Texas now. I moved far away and finally I was in a place where, okay, I can finally let this out with easiness. Not to say that 2 weeks, I'll be honest, 2 weeks after I published it, I had this sense of what have I just done in a way, but not because it's a bad thing. It's because it's like, okay, it's all out there now. Okay.
yeah,
But it's out there.
yeah.
Can't take it back.
Well, it's a tough business. That's what we do. But again, yeah, you put your heart and soul, and you don't. Yeah.
Yes. So my question, you just said a little bit about it. What's on the horizon? You're working on a follow-up book, a screenplay, another film. Is that you were
Well, the
mentioning?
yeah, I'm working. Well, I've been marketing this one like crazy. So I've produced probably about 180 little teasers that are on my YouTube channel, and I've got a one or two posts every week. On the blog and on Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and some TikTok. I don't do that much, but I have a number of things on TikTok as well. and Blue Sky now and X or whatever. So yeah, there's been quite a bit of marketing going on in the meantime while I'm writing the next book. But now we are talking with people in Hollywood, and since I have my experience in screenplay writing, I may have to write the screenplay. I wasn't all that excited. One of my friends, one of my casting director friends, was a big wig in Hollywood. And he says this should be a movie, and so he was talking about packaging and all this stuff. But he says you got to write the screenplay. And I said I don't want to write a screenplay for free. Plus, if you meet with a director or if you happen to land a star who's interested, you want to see if they agree with the direction of the book. Or sometimes you just pull a few things out of the book, and that becomes the basis for the film. And it's going to be very different from the book. So I have ideas that I think should be in the book, but whoever is putting up the money and stuff have made a completely different idea. I'm hesitant to start writing the book, but I'm going to talk to a producer in the next couple of weeks, and we'll spend some time on the phone, and maybe he'll think the same way I'm thinking, and then I will jump on and do the screenplay. And so that's going to push back the my dad's book a little bit further, which is a shame. But um, that one's kind of tough also because it's again very personal story. But the family actually has been very good, very kind. And helpful, and it was fun because I did an event. They called it a virtual author tour or something with the library that is in my hometown in New Jersey. And so some people on that, my older sister was on it, which was great. And then a couple neighbors that lived on our street that knew my folks and siblings were on that I guess multi Zoom call or something. So it was really kind of fun because these people, one of them actually emailed me later and said I couldn't show my face or ask a question because I was too emotional. She said, I loved your parents so much. They were our next door neighbors. And she said, I love the book and I love the stories, but I was too afraid to show my face, but she wanted to let me know. So that was very fun. So there's
Wow.
been some really fun surprises because my hometown has been great. I mean, half of them have to be on Facebook because I keep getting, French suggestions and they're all from Ridgewood, New Jersey. And it's like, this is fabulous. So they've been really good. And some of the reminiscing they've done is fabulous. And I haven't been in touch with these people for over 50 years. And so that's really fun. Oh, say hi to Carol. Say hi to DC. Oh, I took dance lessons from your sisters. And the other one babysat me, and this guy mowed my lawn and things like that. So it's really kind of cool.
That is so cool when you're able to build, a community around it, right?
Yeah,
That's
I'm
awesome.
now like the conduit to my hometown and all my siblings.
That's great. So how can people get in touch with you? Where can they find your book?
If they Google a cup of tea on the Commode, we're everywhere. All the social media stuff, but also it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, I guess, Kobo, other online stores. So it's in paperback, large print paperback, ebook, and also the audiobook. I did the audiobook here. I built the studio.
Narrator?
Of course, you have to be. Yeah. Though that was tough. The book came out on Mother's Day, and there was no way I could record this thing, even with my acting experience. I would hit a chapter, even one that has no emotion in it, except maybe laughter. I would start bawling and say, thank God I'm
Wow.
alone. I don't shy away from tears, but I like to do it in private. So it took about 6 months for me to get everything together and also learn all that stuff because ACX, which does Audible, is very particular. They got some very strict requirements and stuff like that. So I had to do a whole learning curve on that thing, which I'll have to do again for the next one, I'm sure, to update it. But it was very cool because I got to that space of those 6 months. I got to look at the story from a different point of view with fresh eyes. And there were a couple of corrections that I wanted to make. One brother said he objected to something, so I fixed that. Hopefully he's happy with that. And my sister's college major I got wrong. And then there were certain sentences. So a tip for writing, you got to read all your stuff. And I read it out loud and do that. But boy, when you're doing the recording, it's a whole different story. And I'm like, who wrote this? I can't say it. This sentence is impossible. I had to change words because I couldn't say them
Yes. I read,
together.
I read,
Anyway,
yeah. I read my book and read it and read it and read it and read it. And then it's like, oh, I gotta republish. I gotta take it out. It's missing something. And and they said it's gonna cost money. I don't care. Let's just, because I want, so far, and I'm still like, okay, but it's okay. It's okay because you wanna give the best, I can
Right,
understand
right.
that. And
And
so,
don't worry about it being perfect, but you do
right.
want the punctuation, the grammar, and stuff like that to
Right. Well,
be
not
good.
only that, but closer to the story. And then you find out, oh, for example, I had something that it was not correct, with the timing, well, people not gonna know, but and that's,
Yeah,
for me, that's enough.
right.
Me like,
Yeah,
okay, I'm gonna live with that.
yeah.
Well,
There
that
was
is
one story, and this one will have to go in my dad's book again from maybe a different perspective, but I wasn't sure. I don't want to ruin, but anyway, my dad was a baseball coach, and I wasn't I mean, I like playing baseball, but I hated practicing and all this stuff. And I had an issue with pop flies as a kid. I couldn't judge them. Well, part of it was what I'm going to say in this book. So my two older brothers, they were better ball players because they were older, and they would catch these pop flies, and everything would be cool. And I said, "Oh, that looks easy. That actually looks fun," because I called what my dad was doing at the end of practice. He would hit these Mickey Mantle home runs, just deep balls out in the outfield, and my brothers would be sitting there catching them. I said, "This is fun. Those other things that you were doing, I don't really care about, but this looks like fun." So I get out there with my mitt, and I'm all excited. The damn ball hit me 3 times in the head. I ran a different direction each time and knocked me to the ground. And I thought it was 2 times. And I had to check with my brothers. They said, "Oh my God, no, it was 3 times, 3 frickin' times." And I said, if I just glued a mitt to my hat, I would have been in the major leagues because it was like a magnet. But I couldn't do it. It was the weirdest thing. So that's a very funny chapter. But my brothers help with the fact because he's sitting there, did I remember this correct or not? And they cleared it up. And for God's sakes, 3 times.
Wow.
So
Mark, is there anything I have not asked you that you're like, I gotta get that out, I gotta say it?
Not really. I mean, there are some people who are probably afraid of this because it's about caregiving and caring for your parents. But, some people say, "Oh, you're a hero for doing this." I said, "No, it's the right thing to do. We should honor our parents. We've lost some of that over a few generations, and it's a shame." But there's a lot of joy in it, and there's a lot of humor in it. And it made me a better man with that experience because again, I had no kids. I was never married. I didn't really understand, let's say, what unconditional love is. And mom was my first child, and her life was literally in my hands. And that's a huge responsibility. Uh, but it was an honor to do it. And yeah, and people will laugh. There's a lot of fun stories in there too. But other people have said, "Yeah, I've learned some things. It's helped me through what I'm dealing with right now." Yeah, so that's been very rewarding. So if they're interested in, I mean, it's a good book. It's good. There's some fun stories in there. The next one will
I
be funny
bet.
too. But you know, and
Mark,
mom was a
thank you.
cookie lady.
Yeah,
So there.
she's a cookie lady.
Yeah.
She like
Kooky,
to
well, I
bake
was
cookies.
totally kooky. She was very funny, but I'll tell you one quick story. So while she was there, I mean, the book has it, but I wanted to return dignity not just to her. So one of the first things I bought her a new wardrobe because I didn't want her to look like an old lady. So I bought some nice things and I took care of her hair and things like that. And then I also wanted to return dignity to her environment. So I renovated the entire house and kept her abreast of what was going on. And so the basement was an absolute disaster when I got there. So that was the first floor that I did. And when we were done, or before the last thing to do was to get the carpeting done. So I had the carpet guys. I went to the carpet store, picked out samples, and I kept, mom would help me choose the colors for the walls and things like that because it's still her house. And so I put 2 carpet samples that are like 3-inch squares on her breakfast tray and then went in to refill her juice. And I came back and she had one of the carpet samples in her mouth and a scowl on her face. And I said, "What's going on?" She goes, "This is not a cookie." I said, "No, mom, it's a carpet sample. Which one tastes better?" And she chose well. And that's the one we went with in the basement. So that's where you can find some humor. So I had to go find some cookies that looked like carpet, I think, from then on.
Wow.
But
Do you
but she
have
did good.
any did you put any pictures or anything in the
There's a lot
book
of
or?
pictures. It's funny
Okay.
because the publisher, I said, "Do you want some photos?" And they said, "Yeah." So I sent them a
Yeah.
bunch of photos and said, choose what you want. They put them all in. There's like 20 photos in there in the middle of the book. I don't know if this is on a video thing, but that's
Yeah, I
the
can put it in a video. Yeah.
cover.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll tell you the fun story about this. So again, when the universe agrees with what you're doing. So I didn't know I knew what I wanted to do with the cover. Mom had a vision early on. That's the first chapter of the book, Genevieve's vision, about this parade of children that was outside her bedroom window. And this was a recurring dream that she had, the only one that she had often, and very detailed the way she described that. So I made that a chapter, the opening chapter, Genevieve's vision. And all these little kids were about 8 years old, and they looked like they just came out of church. They're all dressed up. The girls had the frilly white dresses. The kids, the guys had the black ties and the white shirts and the black pants and shoes. And the boys were carrying balloons, and the little girls were all carrying flowers. I said, this is great. And I knew in my mom's room, she had a picture of her as probably 1 or 2 years old, but in that white baptism gown. And that's the one that I thought I could make that one work. Then my sister, one of my older sisters, sent me a bunch of family photos. And in that family photo was this picture of my mom, 8 years old, holding a flower with the patent leather shoes and the white frilly dress, just like in her vision. And I said, oh my God, there's the cover. And the first time she saw this vision and talked to me about it, I was a little concerned because she's talking in such detail. I said, are any of them asking you to join this parade of kids? And she said, maybe. And I go, Mom, come on, because, they could go and she could be part of that parade. So that was fabulous. So that inspired actually the end of the book, which I wouldn't ruin for people, but also that would be the opening and closing scene in the movie, that
Perfect.
idea. So that just came out of the blue. Again, it was just fabulous.
Perfect. I'll make sure to put a picture of the book for sure.
Oh,
For our
cool. Okay, thank you.
listeners. Well, Mark, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I mean, and to everyone listening, please connect with Mark. Remind us, what is your website? Do you have a website? Of course,
It's
right?
a cup of tea on the commode.org. Again, a cup of tea on the commode, you'll see it everywhere.
Perfect. And then
yeah.
you have links to social media there. People can just go in there and leave all kinds of perfect.
Yep. If they go to the website, everything's up on top.
And I always encourage listeners, and I have quite some authors that come here into the show. And one of the things is, please, if you like a book, even if, whatever, just write a comment. That's so important today. Just say something.
The ratings and the reviews are very important. Yeah, because I know
Very,
a lot
very
of people have
important.
written them or not written them and have read the book. And I always say, it helps. It not only helps us, but it helps spread the word.
Exactly. Helps other people to find it. And then, so I get a lot of messages. People have read my book and they send me a text message. Say, can you please put a note on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, so other people can see,
Yep.
And so that I always encourage our listeners. And of course, please subscribe to the Life Unscripted podcast so you don't miss any of this so inspiring stories. So thank you again. And until next time, stay tuned and live your life unscripted. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mark.
My pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode of Rosabel Unscripted Podcast, here's how you can support our show. Visit www.rosabelzohfeld.com to learn more about my work, subscribe to my newsletter, and get updates on upcoming episodes. Head over to my YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, and turn on notifications. Your subscription not only motivates me to keep creating, but also helps others discover these conversations. Share this episode with a friend or colleague. I want to invite you, yes, you listening right now, to check out my book, The Courage to Succeed, A True American Dream. It is available now on Amazon and also Barnes & Noble. This is a story of resilience, grit, and what it really means to chase your dreams, even when the odds are stacked against you. If you ever face fear, failure, or uncertainty, this book will meet you right there and remind you that courage always has a voice. Just search The Courage to Succeed, A True American Dream by Rosabel Zohfeld on Amazon, or head to the link in the show notes, because your dream is worth it and your courage can take you there.